Hi, Tony DeWitt here, Missouri appellate attorney and a guy who likes to make the law make sense on YouTube. So, today we have a question that asks, how do you know if your prosecutor's doing a good job? I'll have more on that in just a second. Prosecutors get elected, and the election is often a very political process. And unfortunately, with prosecutors, you don't wind up with a great deal of debate. And that's because prosecutors often hide their particular beliefs when they go before the electorate, because some of their beliefs might very well scare the electorate. You have recently had prosecutors across the country decide that there would just be certain crimes they decided not to prosecute. And that's not the way the system is designed to work. Now, a prosecutor gets to have prosecutorial discretion in individual cases. For example, a 16-year-old child who's being abused by his dad goes off the rails and shoots his father. It's probably going to be a manslaughter case, but do you try that with him as a juvenile, or do you try that with him as an adult? And given the extenuating circumstances, many prosecutors would try that person as a child and not as an adult, even though it's a very serious crime, because that's what prosecutorial discretion does. It gives them the right to substitute their judgment in individual cases with respect to how a case should be prosecuted. And they also get discretion with regard to certain things called diversion agreements. A diversion agreement can be even for a serious felony. Somebody who has written bad checks, for example, and run up a $10,000 bill, they might very well be prosecuted for felony bad check. Or if they are trying to feed a family of 6 and they lost their job and there's a number of other things that mitigate some of the criminal intent here, then the prosecutor might offer them a diversion agreement where they didn't commit any further crimes, and in 2 years of probation, they would not, the felony would go away and they would no longer have a criminal record. Prosecutors get to make those kinds of decisions, and many of those are not transparent. And by that I mean it's not the prosecutor is trying to hide what he's doing, or she, but let's suppose, for whatever reason, a prosecutor makes a diversion agreement like that. In many cases, it's not even revealed to the victims of the crime. When I worked in Jefferson City, Missouri, I had a radio club, a model airplane radio club that flew drones and aircraft at its own little part of a park that was dedicated to that use. And some crazy guy went absolutely nuts and started shooting his shotgun at the drones. And some of the pellets fell on the park and nobody got hurt. But it was a scary situation, so they called the sheriff's office. The person was arrested. And because the person had a bit of a hair trigger and also had been former law enforcement, his lawyer was able to get him a diversion agreement. Now, the people who were harmed by this were quite upset. The lawyer who represented the man thought that that was an appropriate matter and appropriate disposition in that case. But again, that's the kind of thing that doesn't make the 10 o'clock news. It just doesn't. And the reason it doesn't make the 10 o'clock news is because, for the most part, only the people who were directly affected care. And none of them was hurt. Nobody lost an eye. Nobody wound up having to go to the hospital. It was just scary. So in that situation where there was no victim who was injured, the prosecutor made that determination. So a lot of the things that prosecutors do are not always transparent to the public. And again, that's not because there's an effort to keep it from the public, just because that's the way things happen. Now, sometimes their actions are very transparent and come across quite nicely to the public, but you have to realize that in many cases it is filtered through the lens of the media. Now, I would point out that the Darrell Brooks trial is a great example of why there should be cameras in the courtroom. Video cameras in the courtroom help the public see what the trial process is like and evaluate both the judges and the prosecutors. Now, I have seen a number of people complain that the prosecutor in the Darrell Brooks case wasn't, fiery enough. But in that particular case, I believe she did a good job. Would I have been more passionate if I was prosecuting that case? Probably so. But I'm male, I have a different view. She had a different view, and at the end of the day, she got a conviction. And that man is going to go away for life. She did her job. And I would also point out that she was brilliant in telling the judge, let him make his closing and you just correct his errors. Because if the judge had made him forfeit his closing, that would have been an automatic issue on appeal. As it was, she sustained the objections, and of course the jury didn't pay any attention to them anyway, and to Brooks anyway, and as a result, he was convicted. So I think the prosecutor in that case did a pretty good job. But the only way you are ever really going to know if your prosecutor is doing a good job is to go to court and watch. Now you're probably thinking, why would I want to take a day out to go to court and watch? You would want to take a day out to go to court and watch because, first of all, it gives you a much better understanding of how our court system works. Our court system has a judge in one place that is making all of the determinations about the legal rulings, evidentiary issues, issues regarding the law, jury instructions, for example. He's making or she's making all of those decisions. And Judge Doro, I would also point out, did a marvelous job in that trial. And then you've got the prosecutor who is forcefully advocating on behalf of the people of the state where the crime occurred. And you have a defense counsel who is forcefully advocating for his client. So basically, you've got two opposing forces, the prosecutor on this side and the defense counsel on this side, and you have a judge who sits above them and they make rulings with regard to how things shake out. The objections that your prosecutor makes, the number of times his objections or her objections are sustained, their demeanor in the courtroom, the way they interact with the jury, all of these things will give you a better impression of how effective your prosecutor is. Again, drawing on my experience in Missouri, I saw a prosecutor who was inept, who wound up with a won-lost ratio roughly equivalent to the Auburn Tigers in this season. So he didn't do a particularly good job. He didn't get a lot of convictions. And I don't believe it was because the people were truly innocent. I believe he simply failed to make the case. I've always maintained, for example, that in the case of Casey Anthony, the state simply did not make the case. And if, as prosecutor, you go in thinking that because you're the state, your witnesses can say anything or do anything, and the jury is going to wink and nod and give you the upper vote, you're wrong. You have to make the case, and it has to stick. And if it doesn't, then you're going to lose. And if you do that, then the public is not being protected. Jury trials are interesting things. They're interesting things to watch. They can sometimes be very boring. Jurors frequently talk about being bored. Now, I am certain that the jurors in the Darrell Brooks trial were not bored, other than when they had to run off to the back room so that Darrell could act like a clown. But the fact is, most of the time, jury trials are interesting and they are something that is worthwhile watching. So if you have a high profile case in your area, if you have a case that has some merit to it, go and watch the prosecutor. Watch him conduct the trial. Watch her conduct the trial. Watch how things go down. Now, a lot of times it won't be the elected prosecutor. It will be one of her assistants that go up there and try the case. And good prosecutors hire good assistants and they train them well. And these are people who don't work for a lot of money. They work for about as close to minimum wage as you can get for a lawyer. And they do difficult work with difficult people in a difficult circumstance. And they should be recognized for that. The reason I point this out is because a good prosecutor will have good assistants, and a bad prosecutor will traditionally have ineffective assistants. And that's what you need to look at. That is the best way. Now, you could rely on statistics, but you probably remember what Mark Twain said about statistics. There are lies, damned lies, and statistics. Statistics tell you the end state, how many cases somebody won, how many they lost, but what they don't tell you is how many cases they should have won and how many cases they should have lost. And the only way you will ever know that is if you go sit in a courtroom and watch. Now, does that mean you have to watch the whole thing? Absolutely not. Watch the opening statements. Watch a little bit of the evidence, the prosecutor getting evidence in, questioning witnesses, cross-examining witnesses, and then watch the closing statements. If you watch those things, you will come away with a much better understanding of how effective your prosecutor is. So that's my take on prosecutors. If you have any questions, please leave them in the comments down below. And as always, like, share, subscribe. Let people know if you find this content valuable. And if you have suggestions for how I can improve the content or you'd like to request a video, let me know. Let me know in the comments or send me an email. Again, thank you very much for watching and have a terrific day.